Hello, future watchers. I'm just recording from the beginning of our Unlearning Hour today. It is Friday, November 5th, which is my sister's birthday. And we'll wait to see who comes today and look forward to sharing what we reflect on from today's session with you and what happens. As with every Unlearning Hour, we don't know what will happen before we get started. So I'll sit here and see what happens. Maybe it'll just be me. We'll see.
That's funny.
What's funny, Anna?
I don't know, just like, it's just us right here.
It's just us, yeah. I also press record at the beginning just to see, so we can have this moment, the moment of coming into this space recorded. For the future listeners and watchers, Anna and I are in the same building in different rooms. We'll see. It might just be the two of us, but we'll see what happens.
My dad will probably be here later too. So.
Does your dad talk about these sessions at all?
Yeah, I ask him what happened and where we talk about it. Yeah, he tells me who's there and all that stuff. So that's nice because I get to hear from him now. Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's the reason alone for doing this, just to kind of create that triangle between what you're working on and what your dad is hearing, even if you're not there.
Yeah, I mean, I was last Friday when I met with Dr. Gonzalez Miller, I was sharing stuff, about myself, my history, I guess, with her, and then it was interesting to find that my dad was talking about, stuff about me on here, and it was just like, it's really strange, like collapsing of time and space, like these stories about yourself are being uttered in one place and then retold in another. So it was very weird to think about like that. It's all happening at the same time without me being present in a certain space. So
I mean, I could imagine that it isn't just time collapsing, but is there a concern that your story gets told without you to accompany it?
It feels weird. Yeah, that definitely felt strange. I didn't know what to, probably still thinking about what that feels like, I guess. Yeah, but that's a factor for sure.
At the same time, that story and the story that your dad told last week was also a story before you were able to tell it to.
And it's his, his story for sure, and my mom. Yeah. So yeah. And then the whole issue of translation is what brought it on, I guess, right? So.
We talked about maybe the class that you're in at the moment, the Global Indigenous Arts Education for Settlers class, where we had the project about kind of situating ourselves and our positionality. And I do, whenever we're in class together, and I've had this conversation with another student, Jasmine, about her positionality as a Black woman in relation to the work that we're doing together, just as with the white students, and also with conversations about different settler contexts. But there are these moments when I think, and it's important maybe to say it out loud, even though it's complex, where I turn to you and I think, wait a minute, hold up, hold up with how I'm identifying what the whole class is in terms of settler identities and topics of race and topics of ethnicity and gender diversities too. I just think like, and then I remember it's not just this class, it's every class, right? It's not just that we're kind of paying attention to this class, but that actually one of the problems of whiteness as a structure has always, and colonialism as a structure that is deeply entrenched with the structures of whiteness, are not to consider this a kind of a blanket audience, a blanket perspective. And I think that that is challenged every time we engage with Indigenous art, but also every time, you know, diverse student populations are present and professors are present. So
Oh yeah, that's a big challenge for me in my undergraduate course that I'm teaching, because I present various movements, right? Various ethnic, racial, gender related, disability related, we haven't talked about yet. And I am worried, or am concerned. I want to talk about this historical movement, properly, but also highlight contemporary issues in relation to this specific group. And it's hard to, the diverse group of people in my class, I'm trying to not look at them. I'm trying to not, I'm trying to be very sensitive with their being there, because this is a part of their story. And yeah. Oh, Michelle, you're outside.
yeah.
Hello. Yes, I wanted to be here with, and behind me you can see the tree that people made for the. Let me see if I can get this in the.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah.
We can see it.
Yeah, so they did this for the Day of the Dead on November 2nd. And later on, I can go inside if you want to see, or I can go in now, and if you want to see. We got somebody back there.
That's funny.
It's Lauren. So yeah, we can go in and see some of the messages, that people left for the ancestors.
Michelle, I started recording at the beginning, so we kind of capture this, the way we enter into this space as important. And so Anna and I are in the same building, and we just were talking before today, and now we're in separate offices, and then how you entered there. So that was nice to see.
Yeah, it's a little chilly out here, but and I was hoping the sun would be, it's almost to me. Maybe by the end of the hour it'll be on me. Yeah, and on my walk over here, I ran into Scott Jones, who is the director of the Barnett Center, because we have been talking with Leonardo Carrizo and Pamela Espinosa de los Monteros about what to do with our Dancing with Devils exhibit. We have it ready to go, and then the pandemic shut it down. And Barnett Center is open to doing something, and the lovely thing about it is that they're interested in making it kind of like a semester-long collaboration with involvement of, faculty and different classes and things like that. So I think that we have, and Leonardo's vision, he continues to do research there. He'll be back there in December and then back there in the summer. But his vision is to bring the artist, which is more centrally about the Cachawillaycuna project,
When would this be, Michelle? Do you know yet? Or
well, so this will be in autumn of 2022.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the class that Anna is helping create at the moment, the Global Indigenous Arts class, ideally will be running as a 2000 level then, so we can incorporate that into the class. We might have to think about that, Anna, as we make our...
Great. Yeah. We'll continue talking about it, but I don't know if that's a good segue of thinking about what you and I talked this morning, Richard, about what is Cachawillaycuna. There's so many different projects and strands. So I don't know if we want to talk a little bit about that, because the project continues, and I think it continues in really meaningful ways. And there's something about the anchoring principles of our group that continue to guide the efforts that we do individually and collectively.
Maybe actually, Anna, I always hate it when people say sorry to put you on the spot, and then they put people on the spot. But maybe it'd be nice to, do you remember kind of when you encountered this as a kind of project, kind of how over the years because you've been engaged for quite a while with Cachawillaycuna, and then you were, away for a year, but also, and what kind of space does it occupy in your kind of time at OSU and the work that you do? What would you kind of like it to be as a space. I mean, we're running, we still have funding. We still, thanks to Michelle's amazing kind of leadership, we have resources, but at the same time, we also are really interested in it kind of living beyond the cycles of academic.
Oh yeah, our money is running out, so we have
Yeah,
to add it on top of getting another grant at some point. Yeah.
I don't know what kind of space I'd like it to be. I think right now what I see it as is being a creative space for one, where, for example, I see it as like a big space to encourage like unlearning activities and a place to find community. And especially for that, like I'm speaking to you about my being at home all of last year, but being able to join in online, especially with the Pache Sana group, that was incredible. And I still would like I still need to write. I've tried to write about it last year, and I couldn't do it yet. I think I was probably just still processing stuff. But so yeah, so the importance of engaging, in thinking about learning activities, thinking about decolonial theory, thinking about various cultures, especially in the Andean and Amazonian, but towards the South in general. Yeah, in the creative space, I mean, Michelle, I just sent you the Good Mother poem that I wrote. Okay. And you mentioned, you wanted to share it on that Catch I Would Like in the website, which I didn't really think about doing. I'm happy to share it there. But I think that opens up, space for, like, let's submit work, like, how do we share work in the space as well? Aside from, this unlearning format, which we do share work all the time, but maybe I know we started too a document during, I don't remember when now, but we started a Google document at one point to reflect on, was it when Sebastian was here? I can't remember.
Yeah,
but the document. Yeah. And so maybe we need to be building like an archive or something online where we can just submit, reflection, or I don't know if we should maybe open that space up more.
Yeah, so the Gacha Witaguna is sort of like an umbrella, and if you dive into those pages, sorry, airplane coming through. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So if you dive into into that website, what you'll see is nested under it are several different working groups that direct you to the pages, like our Andean Amazonian collection, or like the radio program, like the work that Pamela and Eric are doing with libraries in terms of legacy preservation, archival imaginations, and oh, thank you, Richard. And yeah, and then just sort of like documentation, and also knowledge equity, which is about sharing resources beyond, right? So we have a lot of those things posted there. We have our artist residencies, posted under artist. And we developed a page that was more about like publications and conference participation, outreach, like that type of thing. So all of that is there, and there are many, many different projects with their own web pages that sort of feed into this. Mm-hmm. I need to update this page. Fine. I think soon I will have a TA that will help me sort of update, some of the information on here to just sort of keep it dynamic. Yeah, but yeah, I agree with you, Anna, especially about the aspect of community period, right? Like not even, so I think intellectual community is also a really important part, but almost like a subset of just forming community. And I often tell students that no matter what the project is that we're doing, the projects are just excuse. The class is.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. And these things happen too. Yeah, I was thinking about that element of, labor that comes in with like keeping a website up to date and adding things. And at a university, there are there are so many resources at the same time. So many things fall on individuals at different times, and how, yeah, how to share that. I mean, the Google Doc has a more dispersed labor is kind of important, but at some point it needs to kind of be translated into a presentation. Because like the website still has different times for the Unlearning app. There's that kind of the lag that comes from a website. I also see it from other perspectives, which is the websites that outlive the things that were happening in relation to it. As you know, Anna, like Documenta 14, when I think about the website still as a site of engagement, and I remember these moments of panic when I think it's going to disappear, because it still kind of grounds so much of what I do. And a settlement actually is another really important space that project has moved on to the Settlement is Not Here project, but to know that those films and those discussions are there as well. So
just one moment, Richard. Michelle's trying to call me.
okay, sounds good. Put her on speaker.
Hi. I figured I could come in via, if you want to put me on speakerphone. Yep, you're on speaker. Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. My computer went from 50% charge to 0.
Oh, wow. Turned
off, so. But what I was saying is that the classes, and the projects are basically like excuses for us to forge community and to practice community. So that element of it is really, really important. And then I think of the creative part that you mentioned, about like having spaces where we can experiment, we can explore in fun and creative ways, and safe spaces where we can do that, without having to worry about regulations or grades or whatever it might be. So, yeah, so that's where I left off, I think. Michelle, too, I think you can call in to the Zoom if you go back to the link there. I know you can usually call in. Let's see if there's a number here. That's okay. I'll just stay in. Okay. If it's okay, if Richard can hear me okay through the.
Yeah, Anna, why don't you try putting the phone down so you don't have to hold it, and see if we can hear. So Michelle, speak and see if we can hear you.
Okay.
Oh no, that is too quiet now.
It's too quiet. I'm trying to figure out where my mic is. Okay, try again, Michelle. Hello.
It's not great. So where's your mic? Where did you had it kind of up at the screen there, didn't you, Anna?
Yeah, I had it here, but.
Actually, Michelle, why don't you call me? Because I've got a big pile of books here. I can put the phone on there.
Okay. Bye. It's funny.
Hey, Peter.
Dad, you're on mute.
Hello. Now I'm not. I'm back and forth with the iPad. I got to touch it manually.
Okay, let's just try. Can you hear Michelle, everyone? Speak, Michelle.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's great.
Is that good?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Good. So I'll just mostly listen, and then, yeah.
Okay.
And is there like a terrible echo for you, Michelle, or is it?
No, it's fine on my end.
Okay. Okay. That's great. Okay. I don't know who just joined. What's this other screen that we have here? That's exciting.
I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, Peter, we were just talking about what Cachewulalacuna is as a kind of project in a space.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to go inside because of all the planes, but I think that, during the pandemic, we did have to pivot to do other things. We had been mostly focused on artist residencies at the beginning in our proposal, but clearly, like, we had to pivot, when it came to the pandemic. And that, interestingly enough, we expected it to suppress some of our activities, and instead we had like a boom of activities, right?
Yeah. I
Mhm.
think that that's actually a really interesting topic, which is what this moment is in relation to the pandemic, especially in terms of presence and things that worked when we were kind of forced to be remote, to then things that are, you know, like there's some kind of ambiguity now about it. I was just in a really interesting conversation with some lecturers and MFA students in the art department about how their teaching and their artistic practice kind of came together in their classes. And one of the students was saying that during the pandemic, like the first phase of the pandemic where they worked from home, they could teach from their studio. And they found that they were able to incorporate their artistic practice into their teaching much better in that context than coming into the classroom where they kind of left their practice at home. And so, you know, we might think that teaching art online is just like crazy and impossible, and how can we even do that? But in her case, it was a really interesting opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that beyond like the art studio concept, just the fact that people were in their homes, you know, and that we were able to sort of see them in their context as opposed to meeting in a context where we're all kind of uprooted from our natural environment, so to speak, was really interesting, again, in terms of that vulnerability and that openness to forming community.
I mean, Anna, you were literally at home, right?
Yeah, I was at home, which is nice, especially when I think about some of the activities that we did with Pache Sana, which was to think about like the space that you're in and think about the infrastructure, really, like how is this building, like, you know, physically built up, and then your relationship to the land in that way. And I was in an apartment on the ninth floor, so you know, I had to work my way down through the physical structure, really. But I'm wondering too if the other group that you just met with, Richard, if they were, are they going through any of, I don't know, the issues that we're thinking about in relation to the Zoom space, or the transitioning of, you know, maintaining this online forum? Like, do they still really enjoy this, or would they like to go back to, you know, was this an issue at all for them?
Well, so this was my first time, and I didn't know that it was a space that they'd been, so they created it to kind of deal with the disconnect during the pandemic of how do we share best practices of teaching at this time when everyone is working remotely. And the fact that it continues says something. That said, I don't know to what extent it was as well attended, or, you know, well, one of the people, Brittany Wainwright, said that, who's a lecturer who kind of coordinates some of the foundation courses in the art department, was saying that, like, it doesn't matter how many people are there, there are a certain number of views of the video. And she like said there were like 20 views of the video. So that's a little bit like, you know, Anna, when you were not in Columbus and we were, you know, doing this through in the recordings, and you would watch the recordings. And the thing is, I don't know from Brittany and others in that group how they disseminate the recordings, and I think faculty are involved as well, but I don't know, you know, how they delineate the space and what it's for. I know that they've started an interdisciplinary kind of crit seminar thing on, I think it's Monday evenings, which they've just started, where two of the people, or well, at least one of the people who was on the call today was presenting their work. And so that's a new initiative that seems to be related to actually now being in a physical space together. So and I have to say that, and this is a longer story, but before I moved to the art education department, I had a lot of connections with the art department in terms of, I did studio hours with artists. I wrote for an MFA catalog, and actually Emma, Brittany, and Jessie, three of the lecturers in the program are now were grad students when I was more engaged with the art department. And so one reason I reconnected was to kind of see where they're at as lecturers. And so I do wonder about how, you know, how spaces get defined within disciplines, across disciplines, especially in the arts, and how to get into those conversations as well. And one great thing about Cachuela Cuna is it's, yeah, of course, there's a focus that is aligned with, you know, Michelle, your work and the department, but it really is a space within the arts as well. And so how to bridge those spaces.
Yeah, and even to think about like those categories, right? Because we challenge the categories of like strictly art or strictly literature, strictly science. So I think that the Catawida Cuna project, the name itself, Catawida Cuna, means messages with beauty, situating Indigenous art as knowledge, as documentation, as science, right? So I think that intersectionality is there, and this project tries to sort of highlight that, especially in the context of Indigenous cultures.
Yeah, yeah.
I was, you know, obviously not being a student at OSU, you know, I'm on the outside looking in, but I've asked Anna a couple of times if the Unlearning Hour is meant to grow, and it clearly should. I was wondering why there aren't other disciplines outside even of the arts or art education that are coming in. And of course, I speak from one perspective, but I've often wondered, because it is an area of social justice and also intersects with public policy, why political scientists are not involved, and why social anthropologists are not involved. But now I understand that you've had people in the past that have visited, but I really wondered why political science is not involved in this. I mean, this is, you know, and you would know this as a classicist, right? It's one of the oldest of the disciplines. I mean, it goes back thousands of years, you know, the idea of political science and Plato and Socrates. And I wonder if they would have something to offer, you know, a perspective of longevity to offer. Or I guess I should say we, right? Because that's,
I mean, one thing that you're mentioning that Peter does say is how, you know, really focusing on this time as a space of a public meeting point, with the, you know, outwards facing within the academy, beyond the academy, where relations are, you know, it might be just someone said something to someone else and then they joined and then they stay for a while and then they go. And, you know, it does seem like a political scientist might, you know, who's interested in social spaces and these kinds of questions, even beyond the content or the topics that we're discussing. And the trouble is, when you say things like that, I don't know about Michelle, but for me, it's like we think of the labor that comes with, you know, there's an invitation, but then there's also a kind of, if we really want to promote it and really want to target audiences, that takes a kind of a layer of labor and work, which, you know, you know, it's not saying we can't do that. It's just, you know, what would it mean to, maybe it is actually about meeting disciplines and spaces halfway somehow and saying, well, dear political scientists, we want to know your reflections on what this space could be and this kind of thing. So it is a question of hospitality, I think. And I think that at least Michelle and I have been talking about what this space is and how it's evolved. And I remember we had some anthropologists early on, we had a historian early on, we had many people from the Spanish and Portuguese department early on, and then that was in one format, and then in another format we had another type of audience,
right?
And so it's really open to those possibilities at the same time as knowing that to really kind of curate it in a way or move it in certain directions takes work, that sometimes it's about seeing who shows up. I mean, I send the link every week to arts and humanities professors because there is a list. There aren't lists for other disciplines.
Right.
But yeah.
Well, it's a shame that it has to be labor intensive to do that. And you're right. I mean, there are time constraints too, like just how much time can you put in to do this? But I've just, having joined your group, because you are so welcoming as well, I feel that when I come to this, it's like I'm in the ancient city square of Athens, that people are starting to gather to share ideas. And it's like, where are these damn political scientists? Why aren't they showing up? Or the economists or the anthropologists. It's like, I'm just rather surprised they're not looking for forums to share ideas. This is this
is a good point, and maybe Richard, we need to reach out because we've sort of opened it up and send like general announcements. But we can certainly make efforts to reach out to individual colleagues, often reaching out in a personal way, as opposed to like a department email blast. Has a lot more traction. So we can definitely make that effort, Peter, but I would be hesitant to only bring in, like, for example, here's a session for the political scientists, because that would just sort of reiterate those disciplinary boundaries that we're trying to break. And we love the interdisciplinary sort of conversation, how people have different understandings of different terms and they bring different things to the discussion. But I think it's a great idea, and I think I could certainly commit to reaching out to individual colleagues and getting them involved, and then getting them to involve their communities, whether it's their students or colleagues or whoever. And then this piece about beyond the academia, that has been so rewarding in this group, to work with all kinds of folks from all different backgrounds, all different languages, outside of the academic context. So we'll certainly continue making that effort as well.
And I will just say that, to acknowledge that Peter's making a methodological point as well, which I think is important, that it's not just like why aren't the political sciences here, but why aren't they, they could be attracted by the kind of forum space that we're creating here, and could even like analyze that formal space.
Yes, no, absolutely. We have realized, and I can only kind of hear Peter, I'm picking out like what I can hear, so I must have missed that part, but I think that our task, right, is to uneducate others.
Oh yeah.
Educate and uneducate others about our projects and also about our methodological approaches. I think that some disciplines pose more challenges than others. Some are predisposed to be open and accepting of this sort of emergent and engaged, activities-based, dialogical type of approach. And other disciplines are much more rigid in terms of how they go about their research or their methodologies. So it implies different types of efforts on different fronts, for sure.
Yeah, this is not an approach that your quantitative analysis guy would really find value in, because they're working very ephemerally. What happened today? And you're taking a holistic approach to a very complicated subject. And some behavioral scientists just don't like that, right? They just don't like that broad approach. They want a very defined hypothesis, and this is what we're going to work on for the rest of our life. And I didn't want to bring it up to say, there's more work to do.
But we have some very open-minded colleagues in the sciences and in the quantitative areas as well. And I would say that the intersection there for that type of interdisciplinary dialogue is the STEAM Factory. So maybe we need to, like, I have reached out to them before, and they're incredibly creative and forthcoming in terms of supporting ideas that start from indigenous epistemologies. They're eager to engage. So I wouldn't say that all of the fields are like that, you know. Yeah, we just have to identify the colleagues that are creative and interested in engaging, and that then they can be kind of a foothold or like a little opening into their departments to bring in other students and colleagues. So.
Yeah. I think what we're starting now as well, which I think is important, and we do it in this space and not delegate it to some like behind the scenes work, is, you know, as we, you know, we're still working within the kind of semester-based calendar of the institution. So as we come towards, you know, the end of the semester, you know, what do we want our Unlearning to look like, to be like for the spring? Does it continue? Do we need a sense of kind of even like a layout as to what we'll be discussing each week? Or do we want to, you know, how do we want to like, you know, do we keep it the same time? You know, all these little kind of questions of like the detail, the kind of planning of it. You know, I remember very early on this semester, there was a conversation about, we'd start online, and as the pandemic disappeared, we would eventually be in person by the end of our Unlearning hour. And, you know, that's, you know, it's still, we've been together. There have been moments where we've shared space, who people can be in the same space together. We sat outside together at one point, and all these kinds of issues. But, you know, maybe, or if the Pachasana group would be back involved with what we're doing, or, you know, do we punctuate it in different ways? You know, there's lots of like questions that could come from this space. And, you know, I, for one, you know, I enjoy seeing what happens in this space as a processing space, and, you know, it is an unlearning space. But I'm most excited in this space where the conversations range in relation to the people that are here, and the people that are present, and being present just changes the dynamic. Just as last week when Jarrett presented their work and was willing to just present their work, it just, and you know, just thinking this is our first session where Anna and Peter are together, as you know, you've been together before, but maybe there've been other people that have controlled the discourse as well. And so I'm really excited by that openness, and I'm just wondering how to maintain some of the successful things about the group at the same time as have it, you know, have those invitations be open, you know, be kind of accepted too. And also for us all to feel confident that we want to bring people into this space too. I mean, I think that would be.
Yeah, maybe so moving forward, maybe we should each one of us commit to bringing at least one other colleague into our Unlearning hour for next week, for example, just to see how that type of networking works, right? Jared, by the way, sent regards and had another appointment that he couldn't change. So, but we continue that community beyond the hour and Unlearning hour by way of emails and other interactions. I love, Richard, you know, like, yes, the sort of, we work with whoever comes. And I think Pachaisana really helped us to embrace that. And I love the fact that this is a space for processing and reflection. And we've noticed how few spaces there are, as often we tend to go from one event to the next without really digesting or reflecting on what we just did. So that's my appreciation, you know, of this space. And there's so many things going on underneath the Kacha Widaikuna umbrella that it really is sort of Emily Brokup, one of our curators, when we were doing the Anaconda project in the courtyard and people were just drawing in chalk, she later reflected on how important that space was as a cooling off space or as a reflective space, where we're not directly engaging like the intellectual work in terms of like learning about the collection or doing the tours or hearing all of this information, but an opportunity to just sit and process the information. And some absolutely amazing comments and epiphanies came up in that space for the people who use that space. So I see the Our Unlearning Hour as sort of like that, you know?
Yeah, the processing. So if I can just share something that happened, actually, because Michelle, you started by zooming in from the courtyard and showing the árbol de los deseos, the tree of wishes that was there. And Anna was there at a time when there was the presentation on ancestors by your colleague Paloma, Michelle. And as you know, my partner Rebecca was involved in putting up the tree and all this kind of thing, and as part of the Dia de los Muertos and other, and Paloma mentioned that it was definitely beyond that particular tradition about thinking about ancestors more generally. And I came with my class in the middle of the class. So we came and we kind of did anyway, it takes too long to describe, but a certain project where we had 1 hour to work out, and this is in relation to an artist who was at Documenta 14, Matin, a Basque artist. You have 1 hour to unlearn your individual narcissism and come together as a collective, okay? And this was an event that has a score, that has a kind of mechanism to try and do that. And there are certain devices that are used to try and create a collective subject beyond the kind of individualist narcissism that comes from capitalism, et cetera, et cetera. So we took our devices and we went to this event. And at the event, Paloma gave a really beautiful introduction speech with poetry and everything. And one of the poets that read at the event spoke of the death of her father from COVID. And it was very emotional, and it was very, and when we came back to the class, the students were like, well, firstly, we couldn't use our devices. It was like we couldn't interrupt that collective space that was created in that moment, but also that there was a kind of heaviness to the moment that we brought back with us into the classroom and all this kind of thing. And we had this 1 hour moment that for moving from one collective space to another collective space where so much could change. And I thought a lot about our Unlearning Hour, that in the hour, what's the vibe at the beginning, what's the vibe at the end, kind of what do we take away, how do we move through our days with this? And I think about Anna, because Anna moves from this space with me into a class setting as well. And how, I'm always curious about, how that works, how that kind of makes sense. But yeah, I just, I was just bringing that up because of both acknowledging the impact that this clearing space can have as a reflective space, but also, I must say, it does open us up to a certain vulnerability as we then move through the types of work that we're expected to do within an institution as well. And I felt for those students who suddenly were back in class, having had that experience, even though that class was an experiment, kind of, challenging different ways of thinking of being together. But so many of the other students that were at that event, and Anna, maybe you had class after that, or you had to transition to another space after that very emotional and very sad moment.
Yeah, I
It
didn't.
was like a jarring transition, but I would say that, for instance, when we did the Pachaisana workshops last semester via Zoom, the idea, I think that what emerged, and part of it has to do with repetition, right? Like that we experience one time and it feels like a jarring sort of contrast, and then we do it again and we do it again until it creates a bridge instead of like a rupture between spaces, collective spaces. But what I loved about the Pachaisana workshops was that it felt like we all carried that learning and that vulnerability into our other spaces, you know, and through the course of our day and our week and our classes. Yeah.
So this is a little bit different, but one thing about, you know, you mentioned ancestors, and we're talking around this topic, but one thing that has been, this kind of come full circle now, which I think is really interesting, but so in the class with Richard, we're creating our global Indigenous art curriculum for an undergraduate level, and we are putting in, you know, artist readings, filling out this kind of syllabus, working through this curriculum and thinking about the objectives we need to meet in relation to it. You know, challenges of diversity, race and ethnicity. But one of the things that came up, and it was in the email for this week, was talking about, or mention of Cyrus
Marcus
Ware's Ancestors Can You Read Us, which is a video I also experienced at the Toronto Biennial in 2019. And I love that video because it calls to ancestors in the future. So this is, so I'm gonna like travel here, so just hold. So I've watched this video, which is reaching out to these, to, I don't know what years, like 2050, like sometime beyond, thinking about our ancestors and where they will be then. And then I went to the event at the Spanish and Portuguese department, the Dia de los Muertos event with this Tree of Wishes, and listening to this poet who also talked about their father passing away, which was, it was very heavy. And I didn't have to do anything. Actually, I didn't have class after that. So I just kind of, I think it probably just stayed with me, but I kind of wanted to release the heaviness at the same time afterwards. And then later on with Michelle this week, we had a guest at our collection, and we were asked by Michelle to think of a way in which we can come up with something to talk about land acknowledgement. Instead of just like the kind of formal reading, let's do this a bit differently. So in that space, I mentioned how in Andean cosmology, the future is behind us and the past is in front of us. And so I kind of brought in this discussion, but again, related it again to thinking about not only our ancestors in the past and where they lie, where, you know, what land they were on, but now looking ahead into the future, which I should do this behind me thing, and where they will be in the future. So kind of I'm just like connecting this artist, right? And now we're circling back to this discussion of ancestors here. So that's just a long way of saying I've been thinking about ancestors a lot in different time spaces. And it's kind of come full circle today.
That's great. Thank you, Anna, for sharing that.
Yeah, it's interesting the coherence that you experienced sort of over the course of several participations and events. We would have never done that type of land acknowledgement had it not been for the embodiment exercises that that we did last semester, you know, just sort of bringing that aspect into things. But there were some interesting, you know, basically, Richard, the challenge was for students to just come with something that they wanted to say about the land acknowledgement. And not about the land acknowledgement, but just acknowledging like where we were, acknowledging who we were as a community. And the students said some beautiful things. It was profound. I thought it was a really important moment for us.
That's great. And I mean, I also, you know, hearing you describe one day and of like those cycles and you know, also it makes me feel as well that there's that moment when you were in Toronto at the Ryerson gallery, which no longer is called that, thanks to the, you know, a decolonial act of removing that name from the university, and how you know, I remember seeing that same work by Cyrus Marcus Ware there, and thinking in relation to I guess Indigenous futures and Black futures, Afrofuturism, and all these kind of connections that then seem to make sense in Toronto, seem to make sense as this is the space where these conversations are happening. And at the same time, knowing that they're very slow to happen here in Ohio, in Columbus, where we are. And so when we get to something like land acknowledgement, where again, it's been very slow and very, you know, complex as to, you know, where the university stands, where different parts of the university stand in relation to it. So when Michelle, in your class, you have this kind of open invitation to acknowledge without the structures or systems dictating how to acknowledge, I think it's kind of interesting that's how you kind of brought that with you, Anna, into that space. So and I think a lot about the Toronto Biennial and Toronto itself, and you know, Peter is there speaking from there right now, as you know, it's not, you know, it's a flawed future for Columbus to think about in relation to. Of course, we don't, how would Columbus be Toronto in the future? At the same time, it seems like Toronto, there are lessons and ways of learning from Toronto that we could take up here, and they wouldn't be empty gestures. There would actually be, you know, substantial moves, especially for recognition of Indigenous presence. So I think there's something really interesting about that process and how it's embodied in your work, Anna, as well. So anyway, there's a long conversation about place that we're registering here. I also want to say one thing, which again, I'm going to, you know, rely on Michelle and Anna to kind of start this learning on my own purpose. But when I teach next year, I'm teaching a class on worlds, or the world in terms of art and philosophy, and thinking about the exhibition as a site to philosophize, but also to think about the concept of world. And I think Andean cosmology is just going to be such an important place to kind of build some of that place from. And I must admit that I've been very tentative in my own unlearning process to make any claim that as I learn from Indigenous artists and knowledge keepers, I don't try to enact those lessons in ways. I'm very worried about the settler move to innocence that comes with adoption and appropriation of knowledge systems. And so, and I think, Michelle, you and I have very different strategies in relations to this. And just hearing Anna kind of process an Andean way of configuring the future and the past, which I've heard you know, specifically talk about, Michelle, too, felt kind of important. And so I think it also encourages me to, and that's not to disavow your positionality, Anna, at all. You know, I think that coming from your positionality, it's really important that learning is embodied in who you are, and that we are not the same in this situation. But it does give me a little more confidence to go through this process of unlearning that comes from changing our knowledge bases.
Yeah, so I don't know, like we have to have a more profound conversation about this, Richard, you know, in terms of how we approach things, you know, and just sort of an awareness of some of those power dynamics or risks of appropriation. But as you talk about, of course, on worlds, the concept of Pachakutik, you know, comes up from the Andean perspective, and Anna can can chime in on this, but the Pachacuti, literally, like, so one of the Inca rulers was called Pachacuti Inca, and he was known as the world maker, and also, but it also means world destroyer, right? So it's something about processes of world making as opposed to worlds as bounded wholes and coherent cosmologies, right? It's about constantly this process that goes from world making to world destroying and then back again. So I think that could be a very important, I don't know, perspective to add to your course and to make students aware of, you know?
Thanks, Michelle. And I know it will be part of it, because one of the exhibitions, and I was just talking to Anna about this beforehand, and is an exhibition about Andean cosmologies that's in the book that we're setting for the class, that I'm setting for the class.
Wow.
But what's important for me is, Peter described me as a classicist before, and it's like being described as a Brit as well. Yes, I am, but I'm a US citizen, art educator now, but no, all this kind of thing. And when I think of cosmology and world making, I think of Plato and the Timaeus, and I think of the demiurge and all these kinds of things, and how the cosmetic and the cosmos becomes an aesthetic principle, and all this kind of stuff that happens in relation to aesthetics in ancient Greek philosophy, and how so many disciplines begin with Plato, and how minus Plato for me has been a place for me to kind of avoid that. At the same time, I don't know when I'll be ready to make the leap that I need to make, that starts from where you just encouraged me to begin from, Michelle. And I know it will be there, and I know it will be, but I think I often still thematize where I'm from as a process to break free of it, to show where I'm going. So yeah, and I think that's something that's unlearning, right? I guess that is unlearning, that process.
Yeah, that's very funny. I'm a classicist, like I'm a Brit. I like that. That's a very funny comment. You mentioned something about Toronto, and we're in the gestation period. There's been nothing born here. There is no birth of a new reality yet in Toronto. We're just further along. We're further along the birth canal. I found it interesting. I attended a lecture that was given a few nights ago by an Indigenous elder who also is a practicing Catholic. And he was talking about his native spiritualism and his Catholicism, and was very, he condemned the Catholic Church. There was no sugarcoating it. But as I sat and listened, he talked about 4 aspects of reaching the point of finally reaching reconciliation. And he best explained it when somebody in the audience said, "Oh, I have a question to ask you. What can we do to help the Indigenous people in Canada?" And he said, the elder said, "Well, you can't. You're barely aware." And the guy, of course, there are some people who have egos and they don't like to be told that. So he said, no, I'm aware of everything that's going on. It's the white settler going, "I know better than you." And the elder was very patient, but he said, "Let me explain. You're barely at the awareness level. You have not got to the understanding, the respect, or the acknowledgement." And he went into a little bit of detail, and I don't have to go into that kind of detail because I think we understand it. But when you said, Richard, said something about not being far along, I forget what you said a few minutes ago, but something about you couldn't comment. One of the things I thought about during the meeting was not me, but about you and everybody else who attends this. You are at the acknowledgement stage. People in the Unlearning Hour who've been attending this and fostering it and building it are through the understanding, respect, and to acknowledgement. It's getting everybody else to do that. And, I had to look at myself and go, have I reached that point of acknowledging so that I can say, you know, I'm at the point of wanting to reconcile? It's like, I don't know. I don't know, because I'm a white settler who had a lot of people say, wow, look what you did adopting your daughter. Look at the good life that she has. My wife, who normally would never drop F-bombs, dropped an F-bomb on a neighbor who said that. And she said, no, how can you say that? We're the ones. But, you know, that's the white settler, you know, approach. Well, we're helping. We're helping. That is so patronizing. And we're not. The other thing I wanted to point out quickly is that I got a notice this morning from my school board saying that I did not know this, that November 8th was Indigenous Veterans Day. And I thought to myself, wow, Indigenous Veterans Day. So we have a separate day for them. And the first thing that crossed my mind was Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal. And I thought to myself, so as far as we move ahead, we still have to have a separate day. And I thought, there's something inherently wrong with that concept. All I could think was Plessy v. Ferguson. And I thought, boy, we take a step forward. And as Anna said, you know, you look at the future behind you. And I sometimes think that's what we're doing. I think we're looking behind. I don't think we're progressing as well as you might think. Now, I don't know if it's Indigenous Veterans Day in the United States or not. I have no idea. But I could not really believe that. I was kind of surprised. Anyway.
I'm not sure either. I just was posting an event from the Forge, which is a new arts institution in the Hudson Valley. I'm not sure the exact, I can find their website. But I don't know if I remember seeing something on Instagram about it. So I was, but it's quite an interesting, oh, actually, sorry, I just,
well,
yeah. Anyway, I guess we've got to, I'm excited to see what happens when you all click this link, by the way. I know, Michelle, you can't see this link right now, but it has the Forge project. You go to their website, you click on it, and it has a land acknowledgement, and you have to click to acknowledge.
Oh, okay,
acknowledge the acknowledgement.
I'll definitely check it out.
I like it because it's like, have you read the small print? You know, do you agree to these terms? Do you agree to the cookies? You know.
I love it. Yes, this is great.
Yeah.
Well, so Richard, I will spare you the role of always having to be the timekeeper, but we're at our hour.
We are at our hour. Well, thank you all of you here and all of those in the future. Do recommend looking into Cyrus Marcus Ware's do you read as ancestors for the future? And we'll be back next week to see what that future will be like. And you know, happy Friday. I would love doing this on a Friday. Fridays, you know, come on, we have to celebrate the little,
I know.
for me not waking up at 6 a.m., which, you know, like that's been my, you know, thing I've had to deal with this semester thanks to my son's school. So I don't have to wake up at 6 a.m. tomorrow. That's what makes me happy. This Friday. Okay.
Well, good. And let's all commit to bringing a colleague next week just to see what that adds to the mix. I would love that to do that if we're able to.
And if you can't come yourself, maybe just invite someone else to. You know, maybe that can be the model. Let's see what we can do on that. Thanks, Michelle. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Anna.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.